Hey guys, I want to point out something that's pretty neat, and when you understand it and you see what it actually means, it's going to amaze you. It's going to really give you a lot of insight into the Bible the next time you read through. So check this out. The fruit that Adam and Eve ate in the garden, what fruit was it? Was it a red apple like we see in all the paintings? Well, I say that no, it was not. Was it some other kind of fruit that you can buy in the farmer's market? I'm going to say no, it was not. Was it some kind of exotic, strange looking fruit that, it just isn't on the earth anymore today? Again, I'm going to say that it wasn't. Now, the scripture actually tells us what the fruit was. It was the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. So, what is the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil? Well, that is something that we have and we partake of and we know very well. What is it that tells us what is good and what is evil? The answer to that question is Torah. Torah is the instruction and or the law of our God. He gave us knowledge of good and evil when He gave us Torah. That tells us how to behave, how to conduct ourselves. It teaches us how to love Him, and it teaches us how to love one another. And it also lists a lot of different things that are considered offenses, ways that we can wrong our God and we can wrong one another. Thus, that is the standard of what defines good and evil. When we read, particularly in the New Testament, we read a lot about sin. And in one part it actually clarifies what sin is. Sin is the transgression of the law, or the transgression of Torah. It's when we violate one of the commandments of our God. So, what was that fruit on that tree? Well, maybe it really was a physical fruit. Maybe it was not. Regardless, what that fruit represents or was an eye-opening revelation of Torah, of our God's instruction. And we see evidence of that in what happened whenever Yahweh came looking for Adam and Eve after. By now, they realized being naked in front of a guest is not appropriate. So they ran to cover up. That was our God's first indication. Hey, why did you feel the need to cover up? Well, we were naked. How did you know you were naked? Because we now know what's good and we now know what's evil. Down the road a ways, after Adam and Eve were thrown out of the garden, here we see Cain and Abel making sacrifices. Mind you, this is well before Moses and Sinai and coming out of Egypt, but somehow they knew there was a time to make sacrifices. How did they know that? Well, because they had Torah. They had Yahweh's instructions. One of their sacrifices, Abel's, was acceptable. One of their sacrifices, Cain's, was not acceptable. By what standard was this sacrifice unacceptable? Because let's think about this. If this was just a free will offering, something that just out of the kindness and love of their hearts they said, I just feel like making some kind of sacrifice. Well, then there wouldn't have been any standard of acceptability. But there was. And because that sacrifice was deemed unacceptable, we know that there was a law. Down the road, when Noah was loading these animals into the ark, how many of each species did he load into the ark? Think about that. If the answer that pops into your head is 2, you need to go back and read that again. Of each clean animal, there were actually 7 pairs loaded onto the ark, and of each unclean animal, there were only 2, 1 pair. So how did he know the difference between what's clean and what is unclean? Again, they already had Torah. They already had Yahweh's instructions. When Moses came down from Sinai, that was a reminder. That was a refresher for the people that had been in Egypt for a few hundred years. This was not a brand new revelation. Hey guys, I want to give you something new today. No, that's here. Let's get you back on track and remind you of whatever you might have forgotten so that we can walk together going forward with very clear expectations of one another. So, what was the fruit in the garden of Adam and Eve? That fruit was what we all have today. It was essentially the 5 books of Moses. It was that part of our scripture which teaches us right from wrong.